Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming here today. My name is Billy Leonard. Now, in addition to being a brilliant songwriter and musician, Neil Barnard has been a driving force in getting people to take better care of themselves and getting the medical establishment to change. In 2015, he was named a fellow of the American College of Cardiology. In 2016, he founded the Barnard Medical Center. In 2018, he received the Medical Society of the District of Columbia's Distinguished Service Award. And these are things that he wouldn't tell you himself because that's the kind of fellow he is. He's helped change the American Medical Association's policy in the direction of prevention and nutrition. And that's going to, that's an investment in years and years and years of turning out better health results, better health outcomes. He's written over 90 scientific publications and 20 books, and he's hosted 4 television programs on the public broadcasting system, which, as the name implies, is the viewer-supported nationwide television network in America. His latest book, or soon to be, is Your Body in Balance, and that will be expected to be coming out in February of next year. And it's about food's effects on hormones, which you will hear about today. And I heartily, and with love and affection and deep respect, welcome Dr. Neil Barnard.
Thank you very much, Billy. I appreciate such a kind introduction, and thanks to all of you for allowing me to share some time with you today. I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity. I'd like to talk with you about this new frontier of hormones, but if you don't mind, I'd like to set the stage for how this all began. I think many people are aware of the fact that foods affect the body in many ways. Let me tip my hat to Dr. Dean Ornish, who back in 1990 published breakthrough findings showing that if you change your diet and lifestyle in the right way, you can not just reduce the likelihood of having a heart attack, you can actually reverse existing heart disease. And you're probably familiar with his work, where he brought in people who had severe heart disease, and he randomly assigned half of them to what we call usual medical care, and the other half began a program using a plant-based diet, exercise, stress modification, throwing away the cigarettes. And after a year, 82% of the patients had their arteries opening up again so much that you could see a measurable difference in a year without any drugs, no surgical intervention, nothing, just these simple lifestyle changes. So our research team thought, well, that's exciting. Let's see what happens for people who may not have heart disease. They just want to lose some weight. So we started doing studies in people, finding a plant-based diet, even if you don't exercise and don't count calories, helps people to lose weight very readily. And then the U.S. government funded us to do the same kind of test, but now with people who had diabetes, type 2 diabetes. And we found that a plant-based diet was very effective for them. And it caused us to really have to think very differently. So many people imagine that if you've got heart disease, you have it for life. If you've got weight problems, you're just stuck with that forever. If you have type 2 diabetes, you'll always have type 2 diabetes. But what we've started to see is that the body can heal. Now, we take it for granted in some ways. If I cut my skin, the bandage doesn't heal your skin. In the DNA of your skin cells is the programming that allows the skin cell to reach across this breach and join together, and the blood vessels that have been cut find a way to join as well, and blood flows again. And this healing process is innate in your skin cells. Now, it may not be perfect. You might have a little bit of scar. And similarly, if you break a bone, the cast doesn't heal you. The cast just holds the bone still so that the healing process that's innate in the bone cells can begin. It's not perfect. You might be a little bit sore there, but the healing process is amazing. And it's not just the skin and the bones, it's the heart, it's many organs of the body. We don't want to miss it. So we started to turn our attention in a whole new direction, not for people who are concerned, say, about heart disease or weight or diabetes or blood pressure or cholesterol or the things you might be familiar with, but with people who have what I'm going to call hormonal conditions. And let me say how I was turned in this direction. I was sitting at my desk one day, and my phone rang. And it was a young woman who said, "Dr. Barnard, I can't get out of bed." And I said, "What's the problem?" And she said, "I've got such terrible cramps, I can't move." And many women get menstrual pain every month, but for some, it's just off the scale. And that was her situation. So I said to her, well, maybe I could give you some painkillers for a couple of days. But I started to think, how can we prevent this from happening again? So while she was on the phone, I started running through my mind what was happening inside her body. And I realized that it was parallel from what happened for women who had breast cancer. Back in the 1990s, we were concerned that women who had been diagnosed with breast cancer would have their cancer cells fueled by estrogens. Female sex hormones circulating in their blood were like fertilizer on weeds. In this case, the weeds are the cancer cells. If a woman with breast cancer has extra estrogen in her body, those cancer cells can grow and can spread. And if she hasn't had cancer yet, having too much estrogen in her blood makes cancer more likely to occur. So as this young woman was describing her symptoms, saying, "I've got menstrual pain, I can't move, I've got terrible cramps," started to think, okay, if you have extra estrogen in your blood, that thickens up the lining of the uterus a little too much in the course of the month, and when it disintegrates with menstrual flow, it releases prostaglandins that cause cramps. And I thought, okay, how do we reduce estrogens? Well, we knew from cancer patients that if they go on a high-fiber diet or a very low-fat diet, the estrogen levels will settle down. We also know that there's estrogens in certain foods, particularly dairy products, milk and cheese. So I said, how about this? I'll give you painkillers for a couple of days, but for the next month, would you like to try a dietary experiment? And she said, I'll try anything. She said, okay, I suggested no animal products in your diet. That way, everything you're eating is from a plant and it's got fiber. And keep oils low so there's not much of any kind of fat in your diet. She said, I don't know, well, I'll try it. A month later, she called me and said, this is the most amazing thing. Her cycle had commenced with no symptoms at all. And every month she stuck with it, and she discovered she was completely symptom-free until at some point she decided to kind of modify her diet a little bit and go back to some of her old previous ways, and then the pain hit her again. She thought, okay, enough of that. So that was one patient that made us think maybe there's something going on here. So I connected with the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at Georgetown University, and I said, I want to do a test. We brought in a large group of women, all of them who had moderate to severe menstrual cramps. We split them into two groups. One group got the diet that I just described. The other group was asked to take a supplement pill that was effectively a placebo. And after 2 months, they kept recording their symptoms. After 2 months, they switched to the opposite condition. The people who had been taking the pill now started the diet and vice versa. And we found some things very interesting. As their menstrual periods approached, the first thing is they said, we feel differently. What do you mean? Well, normally I would have bloating and water retention, and that was shorter in duration. If they had those symptoms, it didn't really last very much. And they reported that moodiness was not such an issue. And then when their periods arrived, the pain was shorter in duration and lower in intensity, and for some women it was gone. So we thought, well, that's interesting. You're able to take foods and dial your hormones in this case. Now I have to tell you, one of the participants in this study taught me a lesson. We asked all the participants not to use any hormonal medications in the course of the study. By hormones, I mean anything that would affect the body's hormones, like the birth control pill, for example, because that would confound our results. And so if they were sexually active, they had to use some other kind of contraceptive method. One of the women in the study said, don't worry about me. My husband and I haven't used any kind of contraception in years because we wanted to have a baby, but it turned out that I was infertile. She was telling me about this. She said she was infertile. She just didn't ovulate, and her cycle was so goofy that they had not been able to conceive. They hadn't used any kind of contraception for years. Well, the second month that she was on the vegan diet, she came in and said, "I've got bad news and I've got good news." And I said, "Well, what is that?" And she said, "The bad news is that I have to leave your study. And the good news is I am pregnant." And it was true. She was pregnant. She gave birth after a 9-month completely healthy, normal pregnancy. And about 8 years later, I happened to run into her again. I was giving a talk, and she came to hear me. And at the end of the talk, she introduced me to her 3 children. So the point that I'm making is whether we're talking about menstrual cramps or we're talking about infertility, we're talking about hormonal conditions for which women will be paying enormous amounts of money for pills and treatments and evaluations. And if it's fertility, couples work, they turn romance into a sterile medical exercise of trying to find out when is the correct time, when is the woman ovulating. They spend sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars on treatments when in fact it may be that our foods are causing hormone haywire. Let me back up for a minute. Foods affect hormones? How can that be? Okay, well, one is really obvious. Let's take a glass of milk. Where did that milk come from? You're saying the store. Well, wait a minute. It came from a cow. Now, cows don't give milk. Well, they don't give milk at all, actually. The farmer takes it. But cows are artificially inseminated every year on a typical dairy. And a cow is pregnant for about 9 months. And at the end of 9 months, she will give birth, and then she's impregnated again. And so this is an annual basis. But she's being milked during her pregnancy. And a pregnant cow makes estrogens, and the estrogens get into the milk. Now, it's not very much. It's only a trace. But your body already has all of the estrogens that nature thought you were going to have. So if you add a trace from a cow, that could tip you into a health problem. Now, I should say that when you take milk, and the traces of hormones that are in it can be measured, when you turn milk into cheese, cheese is much fattier than milk is. And so the hormones go with the fat. So when women consume a fair amount of cheese, then they have a slightly bigger hormone load than they would have if they were drinking the milk instead. Now, this has been shown to affect both men and women. Researchers have looked at men who have had fertility problems of their own. And it turns out that men who consume the most cheese have lower sperm counts, poorer sperm morphology, poorer sperm motility, meaning their sperm cells aren't shaped right and they're not moving right, compared to men who don't eat cheese. In other words, it looks like the female hormones that are in dairy product are enough to cause hormone haywire in a man's body. Well, can this really be significant? The answer apparently is yes. Researchers in California looked at women who had been previously diagnosed with breast cancer. And if you've been diagnosed with breast cancer, you have one thing on your mind, and that is, I don't want this cancer ever to come back. And what it turned out was the women in this very large California study, those women who consumed the most high-fat dairy, I'm talking about butter and cheese especially, they had a 49% higher risk of dying of their breast cancer compared to women who ate the least high-fat dairy. So a lot more research needs to be done here, but what we believe is happening is that the estrogens that are made in a cow's body and are accentuated, increased when she is pregnant, and get into the milk and are concentrated in cheese, although they are only traces, are sufficient to affect the reproductive biology of men and of women. This was really brought home to me in another way. There was a young woman named Catherine who was an Air Force aerospace engineer. And she was overseas with the Air Force. And when her tour of duty was finished, she came home to the United States where she lived. And her friend said, "Hey, Catherine, what did you miss when you were overseas?" And she said, "You know what I really missed was cheese. We didn't have any cheese snacks, no macaroni and cheese, no cheese snacks. These are things I really missed very much." So her friends took her out to restaurants, and she kind of overdid it a little bit. One of her friends gave her these box cheese dinners, you know those things where you can make it up in your saucepan? And she ate one every day for 48 days. She ate the entire case of macaroni and cheese daily. She gained weight, but she also started to develop some symptoms. Pain in her abdomen that got especially bad with her monthly cycle. And she saw her doctor, and she said, I didn't have this before. I don't know what this is. The doctor evaluated her, and eventually the doctor did a laparoscopy. That's a special test where you make an incision in the abdomen, and you put a scope in the abdomen, and you look inside. So the doctor looked into her abdomen, looked around, then he sewed her up and took out her chart and wrote endometriosis. Cells that are supposed to be lining the uterus have escaped, and they're now implanting all around the abdomen. And they swell with the monthly cycle, and they cause intense pain. They can also attach to the fallopian tubes and the ovaries and strangle the fallopian tubes and cause infertility. So the doctor tried various medical treatments with her, various hormonal treatments. She was not getting better. And finally the doctor said, well, we don't like to suggest this, but your symptoms are going to go away if you have a hysterectomy. Meaning just remove the uterus and remove all the internal organs there, and you're not going to have this pain anymore. She said, well, my husband and I were hoping to raise a family, but eventually it got to the point where she just couldn't function, and she decided to go in and have the procedure. So they scheduled the hysterectomy, but before she could have the operation, a friend said to her, wait, try this diet change. The friend had heard about low-fat vegan diets affecting hormones and said, why don't you try it? And she did. And she started feeling better. She started feeling a lot better. And her energy was better. She was losing weight, but her pain started to diminish, and it diminished and diminished. And the doctor then did a follow-up laparoscopy. He brought her into the exam room, put an incision into her abdomen, put in the scope and looked around some more. Then he sewed her up, sent her into the recovery room, and went out to the waiting room to talk to her husband. And the doctor said to the husband, this is amazing. Her endometriosis is practically gone. And the husband said, well, you know, she's been feeling great. She went on this completely vegan diet, no animal products at all, keeping the oils really low. She's been really good about it. And ever since then, she's been feeling so much better. The doctor said, no. Foods don't cause endometriosis. And there's no way that a diet change could make it go away. This has to be a miracle. So apparently that's written in her medical chart that she had a miracle. Now, what am I getting at? In all of these conditions, you have estrogens that get out of sync with where they're supposed to be. They get out of balance. And then when we change our diet, things get better. Now, I mentioned one suspect, and that's cheese and dairy products. And if you haven't gotten dairy products out of your diet, let me encourage you to make a note to self to get them out of your diet right now. Mother Nature can't ever figure out why humans thought they needed milk from a cow anyway. But that's not all there is to it. I mentioned high fiber foods earlier. If you have a vegetable, it's got fiber. If you have a fruit, like an apple or an orange or a banana, it's got fiber. Whole grains have fiber. Beans have lots of fiber. But chicken breast, it's not a plant. It doesn't have any fiber at all. Why does that matter? Because your liver is at the bottom of your chest, the top of your abdomen, and it's filtering your blood every minute of every day. And your liver removes excess estrogen. And it sends it down the bile duct into the intestinal tract, where fiber grabs a hold of that estrogen and carries it out with the waste. It literally is flushed down the toilet. Let me repeat this. Estrogen is being filtered out of the blood by your liver, which sends it down into the intestinal tract, and fiber escorts it away out of your body. So, what if your lunch was salmon, or a steak, or a cheese omelet? They're not plants. They don't have any fiber. So your liver still filters the estrogen out of your blood, and it still sends it into the intestinal tract, but if there's no fiber there, it can't be escorted out of your body, and that estrogen is reabsorbed back into your bloodstream. And eventually it'll work its way back to your liver, which says, what are you doing here? I thought I got rid of you. And it takes the estrogen molecules and sends them back down into the intestinal tract, but there's still no fiber there, so it's absorbed again and again. And this cycle repeats. It's called enterohepatic circulation. Entero means intestinal tract, and hepatic means liver, like hepatitis. So the way to break that is to get away from salmon and chicken breast and steak and go to a completely plant-based diet. I'm talking about a vegan diet, because then every mouthful has natural fiber, which nature thought you were going to do. And then suddenly you get into hormone balance. Making sense? The last piece of this part of it is that it's not just avoiding dairy products and their hormones and getting plenty of fiber so that you can remove extra hormones. It turns out that reducing the amount of fat in your diet is important too. By that I mean, if a person goes on a vegan diet, that's a great step. And then we also discover that women's fertility improves. Let me say a couple more words about fertility, if I may. Researchers have noticed something. As time goes on, a woman's fertility tends to diminish. If in her late 20s, if you compare how she's going to be in her late 30s, her fertility is going to decline. Her likelihood of becoming pregnant diminishes. You've heard all kinds of people talk about that, and that's why they say if women are delaying raising a family, is it going to be harder when they're older and all this stuff? Yes, sure, fine. But the point that I want to make is that researchers have looked at how foods affect that. In other words, a woman of 39 is not elderly, but she's had 10 more years of exposure compared to when she was in late 20s. She's had 10 more years of exposure to potentially toxic foods. Like what? A researcher, Dan Kramer, at Harvard University, started studying dietary patterns around the world. And he noticed that in countries where dairy products were rarely consumed, that fertility tended to stay pretty constant between the late 20s and the late 30s. But in countries like New Zealand, like Australia, like the United States, where dairy products are pretty much everyday fare, fertility tends to drop quickly between the late 20s and late 30s. Now, in this case, it doesn't seem to be estrogen that's the issue. In this case, Dr. Kramer put his finger on something else. It's called galactose. And let me explain this. If you take a glass of milk, the sugar that's in it is called lactose. That's why people who are lactose intolerant don't want a glass of milk. That lactose sugar, when they drink it, is going to give them a stomach upset. But when people drink milk, and if they're able to digest the sugar, it breaks apart into two small sugars called glucose and galactose. And that galactose that comes out of the milk sugar, that's the toxic substance that Dr. Kramer was looking at. And it turns out that galactose can be harmful to the ovaries. Let me make sure that everyone's with me here. You drink a glass of milk. The milk sugar is a double sugar, glucose and galactose. The galactose breaks out and can attack your ovaries and harm them. That can interfere with fertility. But I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, wait a minute, how about other problems like ovarian cancer? And yes, it turns out that galactose is also linked to cancer of the ovary. But again, this goes back to, this was never an issue until human beings, being restless and creative, decided that they wanted to take milk from a cow. And in many cultures, they never did until relatively recently. I'm talking about China and Japan and Thailand and Vietnam. These are not cultures eating cheesecake and ice cream. These are cultures where they ate very differently until Western eating habits invaded. So the point being that when we avoid animal products, we're helping ourselves in lots of ways. Now, men, don't go to sleep. Researchers have said, okay, now we know that fertility in men seems to be affected, but what about hormone-related cancers in men? And here we're speaking specifically of prostate cancer. And it turns out that foods affect prostate cancer as well. That prostate cancer is a cancer in a man's body that forms in the prostate right below his bladder, and lots of men get it. And for some of them, if they're old, let's say they're in their 80s, and they have a small cancer that arises, if it's growing very, very slowly, doctors will typically not even operate because they figure it's going to grow so slowly that it won't affect your life. For some, it grows more aggressively. So doctors track a blood test called prostate-specific antigen, or PSA. And if the PSA level is rising too fast, that means the cancer is spreading fast, the guy needs an operation. Dr. Dean Ornish, whom we were talking about earlier, he started to look at what if a man's prostate is affected by his diet, just like his heart is affected by his diet. So he brought in a group of more than 80 men. They all had prostate cancer that was slowly growing, and they were all getting their PSA levels checked. Half of the men were following their normal routine. The other half, he said, let's do a completely vegan diet. Effectively the heart diet. But in this case, it was to see what would happen to a healthy prostate. And what happened was that the men who were on their regular diet and didn't make changes, their PSA levels were continuing to go up, meaning they were getting worse. And some of them had to drop out of the study because their prostate cancer was spreading and they had surgery. In the vegan group, the PSA levels weren't going up. In fact, they weren't holding steady. They were slightly decreasing, meaning the men were getting better. And during the first year of the study, nobody needed any treatment, any special treatment. They were doing fine. Now, don't get me wrong. As the years go by, some of these men are going to have their cancer accelerate. Diet is not perfect, and our bodies are fragile things. But it turned out that in these men's body, you could turn the dials on their hormones and on a hormone-related cancer using diet changes. Now, from women, the hormone-related cancer that gets talked about the most is breast cancer. And every October, Breast Cancer Awareness Month is observed. And up until recently, it has been a signal, get your mammograms and find your cancer early. Fair enough, for some people that's important. However, I would argue that the most important thing is to do what you can to not get cancer in the first place. So we at the Physicians Committee set up a website called Let's Beat Breast Cancer. And if you go there, we talk about tips for reducing cancer risk. And tip number 1 is a plant-based diet. Tip number 2 is to lace up your sneakers and exercise. Tip number 3 is to avoid alcohol, because like it or not, alcohol increases breast cancer risk. And tip number 4 is to have a healthy body weight, which the earlier tips are going to help you to get to. So have a look at that, letsbeatbreastcancer.org. Let me say one other word for the men in the audience, and that's about erectile dysfunction. When we do research studies, people come in because they want to lose weight or their diabetes gets better. But very often, middle-aged men discover that even though they hadn't asked us about this, their erectile dysfunction suddenly went away. Why is that? Well, let's go back to the beginning. Erectile dysfunction in a middle-aged man is not caused by performance anxiety. It's caused by narrowed arteries. And you remember we were talking about Dean Ornish's work showing that a healthy diet and lifestyle could open those arteries up again, increasing blood flow to the heart. Well, when you're on a healthy plant-based diet, it doesn't just open up the arteries to the heart, so as to reduce chest pain or prevent a heart attack, and it doesn't just open the arteries to the brain, reducing the risk of stroke, it opens up the arteries to all parts of a man's body. You catch my drift? So that men who have been having narrowed arteries and their sexual function has gone by the wayside, it returns. And it often returns very, very, very quickly. So all those men who are lining up for pills at the doctor's office, well, maybe they don't need them. Let me just quickly review a couple of other things, and then we can leave some time for questions if that's all right. I've just been scratching the surface of hormone-related issues. I've been talking about sex hormones, but that's not the only kind of hormones you have in your body. Your pancreas makes a hormone called insulin, which allows sugar to go into the cells of the body. And your pancreas makes the insulin to allow sugar, glucose, to get into your muscles, to get into your liver, and so that the sugar can power those organs. When people go onto a completely low-fat plant-based diet, their insulin sensitivity measurably increases. And we now believe that this is the treatment of choice for people with type 2 diabetes, and even appears to be helpful for people with type 1. Your thyroid gland, which is here at the base of your neck, produces thyroid hormone. And thyroid hormone produces energy for your body. If your body needs more energy, the thyroid makes more thyroid hormone. It goes to all the cells of the body and gets them to ramp up their metabolism. Well, many people are low in thyroid hormone, and they go to the doctor who puts them on supplemental hormone. Wait, hold that thought. What we found is that hypothyroidism for many people is an autoimmune condition, meaning something in their body is causing antibodies to form. Antibodies are protein torpedoes that form in response to something in the body, and they end up attacking your own cells. So understand this. If you're invaded by a virus, the proteins in the virus elicit reaction so that your body makes protein torpedoes, if I can use that word, to attack and kill that virus. But sometimes, even without a virus, these torpedoes are formed. And it appears to be in response to something you ate. And so what that means is, if I'm making antibodies that are attacking my thyroid gland and causing it to not work very more, making me hypothyroid, then just taking the thyroid pills, well, that might be a Band-Aid solution, but that's not addressing the cause. So recently, we have seen a number of people who went on a healthy diet and they got away from the dairy and the meat and so forth, and that seems to reduce or stop the antibody reaction. And so they were no longer hypothyroid. Now, let me encourage you, don't fool around with this. If your thyroid gland is not working right, it can be a serious condition. So you want to see your physician, you want to work with your physician and caregiver team to make sure that you're following their advice and getting tested and being treated appropriately. However, it is perfectly reasonable to follow a healthy diet. And a healthy diet means get the animal products out, keep the oils really low, and what you discover is that for some people, even unexpected condition can get better. All right, the last thing I just want to touch on briefly is, if you are in this audience because you were dragged by somebody else who said, you know, a plant-based diet would probably be good for you, and here's Dr. Barnard who's going to explain it, you're probably thinking, well, I bet that would be good for me, but I will probably have to live in the garage because nobody's going to invite me out to dinner anymore because I just can't imagine myself going vegan. Let me encourage you to give it a try. And here's how we do it. We break it into 2 steps. And the first, this is for people who want to try a vegan diet, whether they're eager to lose weight or tackle a fertility issue or stop their cramps or get their sexual function back or whatever it might be. Here's what you do. You don't make a plan that you're going to be vegan forever. You're just going to do a test. We're going to break it into 2 steps. Step 1, take 7 days. And during these 7 days, all you're going to do is try out plant-based foods. You don't get anything out of your diet. You're just testing things you could eat. So let's say you have eggs and bacon every morning. Well, what could you replace it with? Maybe oatmeal porridge or something. Give it a try, or try the veggie sausage. I've never tried almond milk on my breakfast cereal. Would that be any good? I don't know. You've got 7 days. Try out some new breakfasts. Try out a lunch. Try out a dinner. If you're going to an Italian restaurant around the corner, for once, try it not with the meat sauce on the spaghetti. Try it with the arrabbiata sauce or whatever the plant-based sauce might be. And so after a week or so, you'll have your choices. Write them all down and think, these are vegan things I could eat. That's step 1. Now step 2, let's actually try a vegan diet. For 3 weeks, no animal products at all. And during this time, you're going to have no animal products, keep the diet healthy, but eat the foods you've already identified. So it's easy. You already know what you're going to eat because you figured it out in the first step. At the end of your 3-week Kickstart program, what you're going to discover is you're physically changing. You feel better, you've got more energy, you're losing weight. If you have diabetes, your blood sugar is improving, your joints feel better, your digestion is better. But you also discover that in addition to the physical changes, your tastes are changing too. You're starting to discover foods that you really enjoy, and the things that you thought you could never live without, you sort of don't care so much anymore. So then at that point, you can decide you want to continue or not. Let me encourage you to continue for at least a few months and then really see how you do. And hopefully, you'll want to continue forever. Well, let me stop at that point. We've just scratched the surface, and all of the areas that I've discussed are areas where we certainly need more research, and I would say so. However, these are also areas where there is no risk to a diet change. There's everything to gain, and I would encourage you to give it a try and to spread the word to your friends. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And if there are questions, I'd be more than happy to take them.
Sorry. We just come up there.
Check, check.
No problem. Next person will be right down the front. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Bruce, and I'd like to ask a question about I suffer with sleep apnea. So is there any sort of special cure with that?
Oh, I'm sorry to say that the microphone is not clear, and I'm having trouble hearing you. I could hear you quite fine when you were articulating right next to the laptop speaker, but the microphone is hard to understand.
You're suffering from sleep apnea. Yes. Doctor, he is suffering from sleep apnea.
Ah.
And he would like to your
Okay.
view on that. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Just to make sure I understand, you're dealing with sleep apnea, and you were hoping that a diet change might be helpful.
Yes.
Okay. Well, you're absolutely right. And if you haven't yet done this, let me encourage you to try exactly the 2 steps that I was describing. Because what will happen is a couple of things. The first thing that happens is weight starts to come down. And the 2 diet steps are to avoid animal products completely, but also, and this is important, also let me encourage you to keep oily foods to a bare minimum. So cooking oils and fatty foods like peanut butter and nuts and seeds and even avocados. Those are delicious foods, and the fats in them are not such unhealthy fats, but all fats tend to cause weight gain. So if we keep those things to a minimum, what will happen is your body weight will come down and down and down and down and down, and that tends to make sleep apnea to go away. And it can happen usually rather quickly, even with only moderate weight loss. So that would be my recommendation. Of course, you want to work with your doctor, and if your doctor has been prescribing one of these sleep apnea machines for you, you can talk with your doctor about to see if you can live without it as you lose weight.
It has given him heart disease as well.
I'm sorry, can you say that again, please?
The sleep apnea has given him heart disease as well.
Oh. So, along with the sleep apnea, you've developed heart disease?
Yes.
Okay, well, the same diet change is a critically important step for protecting the heart, because the heart is assaulted by cholesterol particles. There is no cholesterol in plants. Animal products have cholesterol. So by avoiding the animal products, you'll avoid cholesterol, and even more important, animal fat causes the body to make more cholesterol. And of course, if you're on a plant-based diet, there's no animal fat. So what you'll likely discover is if you do this prescription that I'm describing, no animal products, keep oils low, and do it with the simple way that I described, or take a couple of weeks to make it work, you'll find that you're losing weight gradually. Most people do. You'll also discover that your cholesterol will drop. Now, if you're already on medications for cholesterol, you can continue that, but your cholesterol level will continue to drop, even in addition, typically, in addition to what's happening with the medication. Then you can talk with your doctor about whether you need to continue the medications that you're on. Heart disease and sleep apnea, these are not things to toy with, though. So as I mentioned earlier, you don't want to discontinue any medical care that you're on. But you definitely want to plug in a healthy diet, because that takes off extra weight. It tends to make cholesterol levels fall. In addition to that, it tends to make blood pressure come down. And so all of these things make life improve the health of the heart. So those are terrific questions. Thank you for asking them.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, I just wanted to say, when you went to Rome last year and the Vatican, and you spoke with Harvard University head of nutrition, and he said he thinks 1/3 of diseases in the world are created by meat. Would you say that that's true? 1/3 from animal products?
It's a number that's changing over time. Back in years past, centuries ago, back when people weren't eating a huge amount of animal products, infectious diseases were a bigger issue, and there were sanitation issues. Over the past 100 years or so, sanitation has gotten much better, some places more than others, and so the infectious diseases have been replaced by metabolic diseases. So the vast majority, not a third, but the majority of cases of overweight, of heart disease, of blood pressure, and even cancers have dietary links. Diet is a major contributor to these things. So if a person were to say a third, I would say that's certainly a reasonable estimate, but it's probably a conservative one, and it may well be more.
Thank you. Anyone else?
That's a great question. Thanks.
Hi, could you tell us your thoughts on vaccination in regard to diet vaccination?
Yes, regarding that, whether people should be taking vaccines, I have to say that this is not an issue that the Physicians Committee deals with, and my own thinking is on both sides of the issue, and I'll just articulate that briefly, which is I am quite convinced that vaccines are effective in reducing the risk of certain diseases. Polio vaccine, for example, or the measles vaccines, smallpox vaccines. They clearly reduce the incidence of disease, and that is certainly a helpful thing. And you can understand why some schools are now requiring that children be vaccinated in order to attend. However, there's another side of this, which is that vaccinations in some cases can cause the very diseases that they're trying to stop. We've seen this with polio, we've seen it with lots of things, and they also have ill effects that are sometimes unintended. Years ago, we had a neurological disease called Guillain-Barré syndrome that was a side effect of a vaccine. And this is still true today. There are vaccines that cause adverse health effects. So there are many people who say, wait a minute, I don't want to be injecting these products into myself or injecting them into my child. And they would like to have the right to do that. And so that's where the debate is. And I have to say that I think there is fairly good evidence on both sides of this. Vaccines clearly do reduce the risk of certain diseases, and yet they do have side effects. And I'm sorry to say that I think that the debate over this and the discussion over this is unfortunately influenced by money, that there are people selling them. And so part of the mandate for taking them is well-meaning medical advice. The other part of the mandate comes from moneyed interests who are trying to sell vaccines so they can make money. So I'm sorry to say I think that's caught the issue. Anyway, thank you. That's a great question.
I'll just come to the other side.
Kia ora, Neil. It's Pat Cody here. First, I just really enjoyed your presentation. What interests me is the society gets so caught up in food fads. I'm really interested in your take around the keto diet.
I'm sorry.
The keto diet.
Oh, so what are my thoughts about the ketogenic diet?
Yeah. Yes, thank you.
Ketogenic diets are, well, I guess let me go back. In the United States, we have insects called cicadas. Do you have them there as well? They're in the trees and they make buzzing sounds. The cicada is an amazing bug because it will go into the earth and be buried for about 17 years before it comes out again. And then it reproduces and it makes lots of noise and then it goes back into the ground again. Apparently, when they are in the ground, they write books about low-carbohydrate diets because about every 17 years, we see a new book coming out encouraging people to not eat apples and oranges and bananas and beans and starchy vegetables because they promise that if they do this, they'll lose weight. So I'm not sure if it's the cicadas or not, but the Atkins diet was followed by the South Beach diet, and then somebody realized that in the world of the modern world, four-letter words sell better than anything else, so they called it a keto diet. But it's the same old thing. The ketogenic diet will reliably cause weight loss for a short period of time because carbohydrate-rich foods are more than half of what an average person eats. If you take away all your fruit, and all your starchy vegetables, and all your grains, and all your beans, and you don't replace it with the same number of calories from other foods, you will lose weight. In fact, if you took away any half of what you eat, you're going to lose weight. However, the bad news is that after about a year's time, if you compare the most enthusiastic keto dieter to people following other diets, the weight loss is about the same. But that's the only thing that's the same. Because you have just thrown away all the most healthful foods, you're left with the most unhealthful foods. So you're eating meat and you're eating heavy cream. And now normally when people lose weight, by any means, starvation, any means, your cholesterol level will normally fall. That just happens when you lose weight. You're in a smaller body, you got lower cholesterol. But the exception to this is ketogenic diets. And what we find is that on ketogenic diets, for many people, their cholesterols go up. Some they go down, but many they go up. Sometimes they go up a lot. And so that means you've been trying to lose weight to be healthier, but now your cholesterol level is much higher than it was before, and you're less healthy. Plus, you're eating the very foods that have been identified as causing colorectal cancer and have been linked to Alzheimer's disease. I'm talking about the diets, foods rich in saturated fat. So I would argue that if you can lose the same amount of weight on a healthy vegan diet that reduces heart disease risk, that reduces cancer risk, that reduces Alzheimer's disease risk, according to the best evidence we have, why not follow that kind of thing? So I think I need to come up with a 4-letter word that means vegan. I haven't quite figured out what that is, but I do wish that whatever insects next decide to write their diet books, that they might look at plant-based diets.
Thank you. I can take one last question.
Hello, can you hear me okay, Neil?
I can hear you, yes, thank you.
Okay, I wondered if we could just talk about soy for a little bit. I find a lot of times my male friends will say, oh, bro, you're going to get man boobs if you eat soy, and stay away from dairy. And I've seen a lot of, information lately about how it's actually the phytoestrogens in soy can prevent so-called man boobs, and that the hormones and the things you mentioned earlier and animal-based, dairy type stuff can actually contribute to these things that they think they're going to get if they swap to soy. And then also I see a lot of like plant-based powders, protein powders, advertising soy-free and stay away from soy because it's got allergens. So
Right.
yeah, if you could just speak about soy for a little bit.
Sure. You hold on to the microphone for a second. You've been to the beach in the summertime, right?
Yeah. Yes.
You ever seen men who take their shirts off?
Yep, often.
Have you seen some men who are gaining a little bit of weight, but they kind of do seem to have some kind of breast enlargement?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do they look like skins to you?
Well, no.
Do you think they're eating tofu?
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, so they got man boobs, but it wasn't from soy, now was it?
No. I know that.
All right, here's the story. Let's talk about soy, and then let's talk about man boobs, since you brought it up. So back in the 1930s, soy products were identified as having compounds called isoflavones. And isoflavones can attach to the estrogen receptor. And so researchers started to think, oh my goodness sakes, if isoflavones attach to an estrogen receptor, that could mean that they're stepping on the gas and they could cause, say, a breast cancer cell to multiply. And so if a woman consumes soy, she'll get breast cancer, or if she has breast cancer already, the cancer will spread. And so well-meaning, ill-informed doctors started telling women not to consume tofu or soy milk for fear of breast cancer. And then they told men that soy has these estrogenic qualities, and so if they consume, they're going to get man boobs, and they're going to be the guy you saw on the beach. However, you can do a couple of things. One is researchers have looked at women's diets and looked to see if they got breast cancer or not. And back in 2004, a meta-analysis summarized the results of 8 prior studies looking at women, particularly Asian women and Asian American women. They picked this group because some of them consumed little soy, but some consumed an enormous amount. And what they found was very striking. The women who consumed the most soy, I'm talking about tofu, soy milk, tempeh, miso, those women who consumed the most soy had about a 30% reduction in the likelihood of getting breast cancer. And then researchers looked at women who had had breast cancer in the past, and they found that very similarly, those women who have the most soy in their diet had about a 30% reduction in the likelihood of dying of their cancer. So it was the opposite of what people had thought. Soy doesn't cause breast cancer, it helps prevent it. And the men on the beach that you've been looking at, who are a little chunky and they've got breast development, they were not having a bowl of miso soup for lunch. What they were having was burgers and cheese pizza and chicken nuggets, and as they gained weight, the fat cells in their abdomens and their thighs and their butts and all over their body, those fat cells are estrogen factories. This is important. A fat cell that you have anywhere on your body, a fat cell is not just a dormant package of calories. It's an estrogen factory. So if you've gained a little extra weight, testosterone enters the fat cell and is converted to estradiol that can cause man boobs. So the answer here is not to avoid the miso soup or the tempeh burger. The answer is to run to that and eat that, and to be avoiding all the meats and the junky food that cause obesity. Now, back to the research, and I'm on with this. Back to the researchers. It turns out that soy attaches to the estrogen receptor. What's that about? Well, let me ask you. In your car, you're sitting there and you got your hands on the wheel, and if you put your foot down really hard, what happens?
Oh.
This is not a trick question. Your
Yeah.
car is on, sitting at the stoplight, you're sitting at the stoplight, the light turns green, you put your foot down, what happens?
You accelerate.
You accelerate?
Yes.
Well, wait a minute. Doesn't it depend on where your foot goes? Don't you have a brake?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, true.
You have a brake in your car too, right?
Right.
Well, what if your foot went down on the brake? What happens?
Well, your head would probably
You don't go anywhere,
thrust
right?
forward.
Soy products attach to the estrogen receptor and hit the brake. So tell your man boob friends that if they have more soy and vegetables and rice, they can be nice and skinny like all the other vegans who are at this meeting now. Their man boobs will go away, their cancer risk will go down, their risk of prostate cancer will go down, and life will be beautiful.
And there's no, thanks Neil, and there's no other allergens in soy that they should be concerned about?
Well, first of all, despite the fact that soy has these benefits, I didn't mean to say that you need it. It's totally optional. It just happens to be a handy product. You know, if you're having, you can turn soy into soy milk and soy cheese and soy bacon. One day they'll make snow tires out of it probably. I mean, they make all kinds of stuff out of soy, but it's totally optional. And if you choose soy, which I personally think is a good choice, I would suggest always choosing organic. Because if it's organic soy, like organic soy milk, which is usually what you'll see, it's usually on the label, it cannot be GMO. It cannot be genetically modified if it's organic. So organic soy is a good thing. Not obligatory. I'm not pushing it, but it's a healthy choice.
Doctor, would you have time for one last question for this gentleman in the front?
Sure, why not?
Thank you very much.
Good morning or good evening, Dr. Barnard. What are your thoughts on protein consumption, plant-based protein consumption? Like, how much is adequate? How much is too much? How much is not enough?
Okay, so how much protein do you need? How much protein does a person need? Yeah, governmental sources would well, first of all, you don't really need to be adding it up, but I'll give you the numbers just so that you have them. Governmental authorities would say a woman should have about 46 grams of protein a day and a man about 56. And if you're physically active or larger, you might need a little bit more. But it's in that range, sort of right around 50, give or take. And so then some people have wondered, can I get that from a plant-based diet? So let me give you a few numbers. Let's say, when I was a kid, I grew up in North Dakota, which is cattle country. And we had the whole idea that meat on your plate was the protein, and vegetables were vitamins, I guess, and starches were calories. And so if you took away the meat, we didn't know where the protein would come from. So if I do an experiment, and let's say I eat about 2,000 calories a day, which would be a typical number, if, as an experiment, I ate only vegetables for a day? In fact, what if I ate nothing but broccoli all day? I'm going to eat 2,000 calories, but everything I ate is going to be broccoli. I hope you don't do this, but if you did, you would get 146 grams of pure protein. And the next day, let's say you ate just lentils. If you had all your day's meals, but everything was a lentil, you would get 157 grams of pure protein. In other words, you would meet your entire protein requirement plus an extra 100 grams. So hopefully you don't do that. Hopefully you have some broccoli and some lentils and some corn and some rice and some vegetables and fruits and the whole mixture. A plant-based diet gives you all the protein that you need. And that's true even if you're an athlete. Now, if you want to increase your amount of protein, you can do it by focusing on the bean group and products. And there are vegan powders that you can have. They're not really necessary. Some people like them. Some people do feel a little bit more emotionally balanced if they have higher protein foods. I'm talking about plant protein in the morning. I'm talking about grilled tofu or grilled tempeh or something like that. And you have the plant protein first and then the starchier foods later. Some people feel better with that. But you're not going to become protein inadequate on a vegan diet at all. A healthy vegan diet is simply two things. 4 food groups: vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and beans. And you do need a B12 supplement, vitamin B12. That's not optional. And we could talk in another time about why that's important. But if you do those 2 things, you got a great diet. So thank you. That's a great question. I appreciate your asking. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil, and thank you all of you for listening today. You can imagine how much I learned from this man when I worked for him several years ago. PCRM does...
And we miss you, Billy. We miss you and we want you back. We miss you very much. Thank you, Billy.
Thank you very much, all of you.